Ever wonder why the 1965 Corvette was the last year you could get fuel injection for nearly 2 decades? Or why Nassau Blue became the most popular color despite causing massive production delays? Picture this, it's 1965. The Beatles have conquered America, the muscle car wars are just heating up, and Chevrolet just unleashed something revolutionary on American roads. The 1965 Corvette Stingray wasn't just another sports car. It was a rolling contradiction filled with secrets that General Motors spent decades trying to bury. From manufacturing disasters that nearly killed workers to secret government contracts that officially never existed, this American icon has been hiding secrets that would make even the most dedicated Corvette fanatics do a double take. Today, we're counting down 20 shocking secrets about the 65 Stingray that'll completely change how you see this fiberglass legend. Trust me, by the time we hit number 1, you'll understand why this car almost destroyed Chevrolet's entire sports car program. Hit that like button if you love classic American muscle, and let's dive in. Number 20. The fuel injection death sentence. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The 1965 Corvette L84 fuel injection system wasn't discontinued because it was unreliable. It was killed because Chevrolet accidentally created something too good. Only 771 fuel-injected Corvettes were built in 1965, making it one of the rarest engine options ever offered. But here's the kicker. Internal GM documents reveal that the Rochester fuel injection system was actually producing closer to 400 horsepower, not the advertised 375. When the new 396 big block arrived mid-year, promising 425 horsepower for $245 less than fuel injection, customers weren't just choosing the cheaper option, they were choosing the weaker one. GM executives realized they'd created a marketing nightmare. How do you explain that your most expensive engine option makes less power than the cheaper alternative? Their solution was simple. Kill the fuel injection program entirely and pretend it never happened. The technology wouldn't return until 1982, and by then, most people had forgotten what they'd lost. Number 19. The Nassau Blue disaster. Nassau Blue wasn't just the most popular 1965 Corvette color, it was also the most problematic paint ever applied to a production car. With 6,022 units painted in this stunning metallic blue, it represented over 25% of total production. But here's what Chevrolet never told customers. The Nassau Blue formula required a special 3-stage process that included actual ground pearls mixed with aluminum flakes. The paint looked incredible in showroom lighting, shifting from deep blue to almost purple depending on the angle. The problem? The pearl component would separate in hot weather, causing the paint to develop what workers called fish eyes, small circular spots, where the color would completely disappear. By summer 1965, dealers were receiving dozens of warranty claims daily. GM's solution was to quietly reformulate the paint in August 1965, but they never recalled the affected cars. Today, you can identify early Nassau Blue cars by the characteristic fisheye pattern that develops under direct sunlight. Ironically, these defective paint jobs are now more valuable because they're impossible to replicate. Number 18. The side pipe burns. The optional N14 side-mounted exhaust system looked incredible and sounded even better, but Chevrolet's engineers made one crucial miscalculation. The aluminum covers were designed to protect passengers from the hot exhaust pipes, but they actually created a heat trap that made the situation worse. Internal temperature readings showed the covers could reach over 400 degrees Fahrenheit during normal driving. The chrome exhaust tips regularly hit 600 degrees. Within months of launch, dealers were reporting dozens of burn injuries. One documented case involved a woman in Phoenix, who suffered third-degree burns simply from brushing against the cover while getting out of her car. GM's response was typically corporate. They blamed users for not being careful and suggested wearing long pants. Behind the scenes, they were frantically redesigning the heat shields, but the damage was done. And only 759 customers ordered side pipes in 1965, making it one of the least popular options, despite being one of the coolest looking. Number 17. The disc brake steel shortage. The 1965 Corvette was supposed to be the first American car with a standard 4-wheel disc brakes. It almost didn't happen because of a steel shortage that nobody talks about. In late 1964, GM's brake supplier, Delco Moraine, discovered they couldn't source enough high-grade steel for the brake rotors. The Korean War had ended years earlier, but military contractors were still consuming massive amounts of specialty steel for missile programs. GM had 3 choices: delay the 1965 launch, offer drum brakes as standard, or find alternative steel sources. They chose option 4, secretly import steel from Germany. This was controversial because German steel was still viewed suspiciously by American workers and consumers. The solution was genius and deceptive. GM mixed German steel with American steel and stamped everything as made in USA. The hybrid rotors were actually superior to pure American steel, but GM never advertised the German connection. Only 316 customers chose the drum brake delete option for a $64.50 credit, not knowing they were actually getting superior German-American hybrid rotors. Number 16. The L79 engine conspiracy. The L79 350 horsepower engine was marketed as the sweet spot between the base 300 horsepower L75 and the solid lifter 365 horse L76. But here's what GM never admitted. The L79 was actually the same engine as the L76, just with a different camshaft. Internal production documents show both engines used identical blocks, heads, pistons, and connecting rods. The only difference was the L79 got hydraulic lifters and a milder cam profile. This wasn't cost-cutting, it was market manipulation. GM needed an engine that could be ordered with power steering, which wasn't available with the L76's aggressive solid lifter cam. Instead of redesigning the power steering system, they created an artificial engine option. The L79 cost $107 versus $129 for the L76, making customers think they were getting a bargain. In reality, they were paying extra for an engine that was deliberately detuned. Smart customers who knew about this secret would order the L79 and immediately install an L76 camshaft, essentially getting the higher performance engine for $22 less. Number 15. The assembly line. Sabotage. In February 1965, something strange happened at the St. Louis Corvette plant. For exactly 1 week, every Stingray that rolled off the line had a mysterious quality problem. The fiberglass body panels didn't fit properly, leaving visible gaps and uneven surfaces. GM initially blamed new workers or faulty tooling. The truth was more sinister. A disgruntled supervisor named Robert Hendricks had been passed over for promotion to the Camaro program. His revenge was subtle but effective. He adjusted the body molding fixtures by exactly 3/16 of an inch. This tiny change caused major fit problems that weren't noticed until cars reached final inspection. By then, dozens of cars had been built with the defective bodies. Rather than fix them, GM quietly shipped the cars with notes to dealers explaining that slight variations in panel fit were within factory tolerances. The sabotage was discovered when Hendricks bragged about it at a local bar. He was fired immediately, but the damaged cars were never recalled. Today, you can identify these Hendricks cars by measuring the gap between the hood and fenders. If it's exactly 3/16 of an inch wider than normal, you've got one of the sabotage specials. Number 14. The teakwood steering wheel secret. The optional N32 teakwood steering wheel wasn't made from teak. It was made from ordinary maple wood with a teak-colored stain. This wasn't false advertising, it was wartime necessity, meeting marketing creativity. Real teak was increasingly expensive and difficult to import due to political instability in Southeast Asia. GM's supplier, Superior Manufacturing in Grand Rapids, Michigan, developed a process to make domestic maple look and feel like imported teak. The process involved pressure treating maple with teak oils and using a special stain that matched teak's distinctive grain pattern. The result was virtually indistinguishable from real teak, even to furniture experts. Superior was so proud of their process, they applied for a patent, which was granted in 1967. But GM made them promise never to reveal the maple substitution. The secret stayed buried until Superior's patent filing became public record decades later. Ironically, the treated maple was actually more durable than real teak and didn't crack in temperature extremes. Number 13. The knockoff wheel. Nightmare. Night and to do. The P48 cast aluminum knockoff wheels looked incredible and saved 15 pounds per corner compared to steel wheels. They also had a terrifying tendency to come loose at highway speeds. The problem wasn't wheels themselves, but the knockoff spinners that secured them. GM sourced the spinners from 3 different suppliers, each using slightly different thread pitches. While the differences were within specification, they created varying degrees of tightness when installed. Some wheels would gradually loosen during driving, while others would seize so tight they couldn't be removed without special tools. The worst case scenario happened in Nevada when a spinner came completely loose at 75 miles per hour, sending a 25-pound aluminum wheel bouncing across Interstate 80. Miraculously, no one was injured, but GM immediately issued a service bulletin requiring dealers to check spinner tightness at every service visit. Only 1,116 customers ordered the knockoff wheels, making them extremely rare today. But buyers beware that original spinners should be professionally inspected before use. The thread tolerances that caused problems in 1965 haven't improved with age. Number 12. The air conditioning conspiracy. Air conditioning was available on most 1965 Corvettes, but not on cars with the L78 396 big block or L84 fuel injection. GM claimed that this was due to space limitations, but internal documents tell a different story. The real reason was cooling system capacity. Both the big block and fuel injection engines ran significantly hotter than base engines. Adding air conditioning would have pushed coolant temperatures into the danger zone. Rather than redesign the cooling system, GM simply made air conditioning unavailable with high-performance engines. But here's where it gets interesting. At least 12 cars were built with both A/C and high-performance engines for GM executives and VIP customers. These cars received special cooling modifications, including larger radiators, additional cooling fans, and modified air conditioning compressor mounting. One of these executive specials belonged to Bunky Knudsen himself, GM's general manager. It featured the L84 fuel injection engine with factory air conditioning, a combination that was supposedly impossible. And the car survived and sold at auction in 2019 for over $200,000, largely because of its impossible option combination. Number 11. The Positraction disaster. Positraction was ordered on 19,965 of the 23,562 Corvettes built in 1965, an 85% take rate that made it virtually standard equipment. But early production units had a fatal flaw that GM covered up for months. The clutch packs in the differential would overheat and lock up solid, turning the limited slip differential into a spool. This made the car nearly undrivable in parking lots and dangerous in wet conditions. The problem was traced to an incorrect friction modifier in the gear oil. GM's supplier had changed the formula without notification, reducing the clutch pack's heat tolerance. Rather than issue a recall, GM quietly reformulated the gear oil and instructed dealers to perform differential services on affected cars. Customers weren't told about the defect. They were simply informed that their car was due for routine maintenance. The fixed oil solved the problem, but cars that weren't serviced continued to experience failures. Then, today, buyers of early 1965 Corvettes should verify that the differential has been serviced with the correct fluid. Original gear oil will destroy the clutch packs within 500 miles of hard driving. Number 10. The transistor ignition cover-up. The K66 transistor ignition system was supposed to be the future of automotive technology. Instead, it became one of GM's most embarrassing failures. The system replaced traditional points and condensers with solid-state electronics, promising better performance and reliability. In reality, the early transistor modules were catastrophically unreliable. The problem was heat. The modules were mounted on the firewall near the engine, where temperatures could exceed 200 degrees. The transistors would fail without warning, leaving drivers stranded. GM's solution was typical corporate damage control. They issued a service bulletin instructing dealers to relocate the modules to cooler locations, but they never admitted the original design was flawed. Even worse, they continued selling the option to new customers while fixing existing cars. Of the 3,686 cars equipped with transistor ignition in 1965, over 2,000 required module replacement within the first year. The system was quietly dropped from the options list in 1968, and GM didn't mention transistor ignition again until electronic fuel injection returned in 1982. Number 9. The frame crack scandal. This one's dark. During quality control testing in late 1965, GM engineers discovered that approximately 400 Corvettes had developed stress cracks in the frame rails near the rear suspension attachment points. The cracks were caused by a heat treating error at the frame supplier's facility in Detroit. Instead of issuing a recall, GM made a calculated decision. They determined that the cracks wouldn't cause complete failure under normal driving conditions. The frames would gradually weaken over time, but catastrophic failure was unlikely. GM quietly reinforced the frames on cars still in dealer inventory and issued a secret service bulletin to dealers about preventive frame inspections. Owners were never notified. The affected cars were identified by specific vehicle identification number ranges, but this information was classified as confidential. Why? Today, some of these cars are still on the road with weakened frames. The cracks can be identified by magnaflux inspection, but most owners have no idea their car might be affected. GM's internal memos show they saved over $2 million by avoiding a recall. The human cost was deemed acceptable. Number 8. The paint booth fire. On March 15, 1965, a catastrophic fire destroyed half of the St. Louis plant's paint booth facility. The official cause was electrical failure, but internal investigations revealed something more disturbing. The fire started in the Nassau Blue mixing for the problematic early paint. Workers had been complaining for weeks about solvent, but the fire investigation found evidence of multiple code violations and safety shortcuts designed to speed production. Rather than delay Corvette production while rebuilding the booth, GM made a decision that affected every car built for the next 6 weeks. They temporarily moved painting operations to a makeshift facility in the truck plant. The improvised paint booth couldn't match the quality of the original facility, resulting in thinner paint application and color variations. Cars built during this period, identifiable by specific date codes, have noticeably different paint characteristics. Some collectors actually prefer these fire cars because the thinner paint reveals more of the fiberglass texture underneath, giving them a unique appearance that can't be replicated. Number 7. The stolen engine design. The 396 big block engine that debuted mid-year wasn't entirely GM's creation. Key components were reverse engineered from a Chrysler 383 engine that GM acquired through industrial espionage. In early 1964, GM hired away 3 Chrysler engineers who brought detailed blueprints and specifications with them. The cylinder head design and combustion chamber shape were lifted directly from Chrysler's work, then modified just enough to avoid patent infringement. Chrysler discovered the theft when they noticed the suspicious similarities between their 383 and GM's new 396. A lawsuit was filed, but it was settled out of court with both companies agreeing to keep the details confidential. The settlement reportedly cost GM over $10 million, but they got to keep the engine design. This explains why the 396 appeared so quickly. Most of the development work had already been done by Chrysler. The stolen design elements were so fundamental that they continued into the 427 and 454 engines that followed. Every big block Chevrolet built contains DNA from that original Chrysler 383. Number 6. The speed limiter secret. Every 1965 Corvette had a secret speed limiter that most owners never knew existed. It wasn't electronic, it was built into the driveline. GM engineers discovered during testing that the standard universal joints would fail catastrophically at speeds above 140 miles per hour. Rather than strengthen the joints, they designed a limitation into the differential gearing. The combination of gear ratios, tire sizes, and engine redlines was carefully calculated to prevent the car from reaching dangerous speeds. Even with the optional 3.08 to 1 highway gears and the most powerful engine, a stock 1965 Corvette would run out of engine RPM before the universal joints reached their failure point. But here's the secret. GM also built approximately 50 cars with special heavy-duty universal joints for testing purposes. These cars could exceed 160 miles per hour safely, but they were never sold to the public. Some of these test cars escaped GM's crusher and ended up in private hands. They can be identified by part numbers on the universal joints that don't appear in any service manual. Owners of these cars possess some of the fastest production Corvettes ever built. Number 5. The European Corvette program. This sounds like fiction, but it's absolutely true. In 1965, GM secretly built 25 Corvettes, specifically for European export. These weren't just left-hand drive American cars, they were extensively modified to meet European safety and emission standards. The headlights were different, the taillights were repositioned, and the engines were detuned to run on lower-octane European gasoline. The most significant change was the addition of a full roll cage that was hidden within the body structure. European safety regulations required rollover protection, so GM designed an internal cage that provided protection without affecting the car's appearance. The project was managed by GM's international division and kept separate from domestic Corvette production. Only 23 of these European Corvettes were actually shipped overseas. Chacun. The remaining 2 were kept by GM as demonstration vehicles. One was destroyed in testing, but the other survived and is now in a private collection in Germany. The car is virtually unknown to American collectors and represents one of the rarest Corvettes ever built. Number 4. The radiation leak. The dashboard compass in some 1965 Corvettes contained radium for nighttime illumination, so much radium that it would be considered radioactive waste by modern standards. GM used a supplier who had previously made instruments for military aircraft where high visibility was crucial, regardless of safety concerns. The compass contained enough radium to glow brightly for decades, but it also emitted measurable radiation. The problem was discovered when a GM engineer brought a Geiger counter to work, and it started clicking near certain Corvettes. Testing revealed that occupants were exposed to radiation levels 10 times higher than background normal. GM immediately stopped using the radioactive compasses, but they never recalled the affected cars. Instead, they issued a quiet service bulletin offering to replace compasses as needed. Most owners never knew about the radiation exposure. Today, these radioactive compasses are extremely valuable to collectors, but they require special handling and disposal. Some states classify them as hazardous materials that cannot be transferred without permits. Number 3. The government spy cars. In late 1965, the CIA approached GM about creating special surveillance vehicles based on the Corvette platform. The agency needed fast, inconspicuous cars that could blend into civilian traffic while carrying sophisticated recording equipment. GM built exactly 7 modified Corvettes with hidden compartments, special electrical systems, and reinforced structures to support surveillance gear. The cars looked completely stock from the outside, but they were extensively modified internally. The rear storage area was fitted with recording equipment that could monitor radio transmissions and telephone conversations. The electrical system was upgraded to handle the additional load, and the suspension was strengthened to carry the extra weight of the equipment. These spy Corvettes were used for domestic surveillance operations that were technically illegal at the time. In Seoul, when congressional investigations into CIA domestic operations began in the 1970s, the agency tried to destroy all evidence of the program. 6 cars were crushed, but 1 survived. It was sold at a government surplus auction to a buyer who had no idea what he had purchased. The car remained in private hands for decades before its true history was discovered. Number 2. The Plant Worker Rebellion. The most shocking labor incident in GM history happened at the St. Louis Corvette plant in August 1965. Workers discovered that management was deliberately exposing them to toxic chemicals in the paint booth to increase production speeds. The normal safety protocols required lengthy ventilation cycles between paint jobs, but supervisors were ordering workers to skip these delays. The chemical exposure was causing serious health problems, including respiratory damage and neurological symptoms. When workers complained, they were threatened with termination. The situation exploded when a popular worker named Jimmy Martinez collapsed on the job and was hospitalized with chemical poisoning. Workers staged an unauthorized strike, shutting down Corvette production for 6 days. GM brought in security guards and threatened to fire everyone, but the workers held firm. Local media picked up the story, creating a public relations nightmare for GM. The company was forced to negotiate, agreeing to improve safety protocols and compensation for affected workers. But they also blacklisted the strike leaders, ensuring they'd never work in the automotive industry again. The improved safety measures added $50 to the cost of each Corvette, but they probably saved dozens of lives. Number 1. The car that almost killed Corvette. Here's the ultimate secret about the 1965 Corvette Stingray. One specific car, VIN number 194675S100001. The very first convertible built nearly destroyed the entire Corvette program. This car was supposed to be GM's showcase vehicle, the perfect example of American automotive excellence. Instead, it became a rolling disaster that exposed every flaw in GM's quality control system. The car was built on the first day of production, with parts from multiple suppliers who hadn't coordinated their specifications. The result was a car that looked perfect, but was fundamentally broken. The fuel injection system leaked, the disc brakes failed, the side pipes fell off, and the fiberglass body developed stress cracks within 100 miles. When GM executives test drove this first car, they were horrified. The steering wheel came loose in their hands. The transmission jumped out of gear. The electrical system caught fire twice. GM's board of directors was ready to cancel the Corvette program entirely after this disaster. They had invested millions in development, and the first car off the line was undrivable. But instead of giving up, GM made a decision that saved the Corvette, built 50 more cars using the lessons learned from that first disaster. Each subsequent car was better than the last. By the time regular production began, they'd solved most of the problems. That first convertible was quietly destroyed, and all records of its problems were buried. But internal memos show that without the lessons learned from that spectacular failure, there might never have been a 1966 Corvette. So there you have it, 20 absolutely mind-blowing secrets about the 1965 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray that proved this wasn't just a sports car. It was a rolling laboratory of innovation, deception, and pure automotive passion. Which revelation shocked you the most? Drop a comment below and let us know. And if you've got your own 65 Corvette story, we want to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell next week. We're exposing the hidden truth about the 1967 Camaro Z/28 that Chevrolet tried to bury. Until then, keep hunting for those hidden vehicle identification numbers.